The rain in Miami never washed the city clean. It only made the streets reflect the neon lights like a broken mirror. It was 1985. To the tourists, Miami was a sun-drenched paradise of palm trees and white sand. But to me, it was a concrete jungle that only woke up when the sun went down, bleeding in shades of electric pink and hot cyan. My name is Leo Vance. I'm a private detective. I don't have a shiny badge, just a faded linen suit, aviator sunglasses that I wear even at midnight, and a vintage muscle car that drinks gas like water. It all started on a rainy Tuesday. I was sitting in my smoke-filled office, watching the neon sign of the Neon Lounge flicker across the street. The door opened, and a manila folder was dropped onto my desk. Inside was a case file for a young woman named Elena. She had vanished 3 nights ago from the VIP lounge of the Velvet Neon, the city's most exclusive nightclub. My first stop was Elena's apartment. The place was a mess, indicating she left in a hurry. Hunting for clues, my eyes caught a small wooden desk. Under the glow of a retro lamp, I found 3 things: a vintage cassette tape, a matchbook from the Velvet Neon, and a Polaroid photo of Elena looking terrified. The clues didn't point to a simple runaway. They pointed to something much darker. I drove down to the Velvet Neon. The club was a sensory overload of smoke, pulsing synthwave beats, and blinding pink lasers. I slipped a 20 to the bartender, leaning against the glossy counter. He leaned in and whispered a name that made my blood run cold. Elena hadn't been kidnapped by street thugs. She had stumbled upon a secret meeting of the city's highest syndicate, corrupt billionaires and politicians who ruled Miami from their penthouse suites. They knew I was asking questions. As soon as I hit the highway, a black luxury sedan pulled up behind my metallic blue muscle car. High-beam headlights blinded my rearview mirror. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered my back window. I slammed on the gas. The tires screeched against the wet, glowing asphalt as we engaged in a high-speed chase through the skyscraper-lined highway. It was a race against time. Drifting sharply around a wet corner, I slammed my brakes, letting the sedan overshoot, and fired 3 rounds into their tires. The black car spun out of control, crashing into a row of neon billboards. The trail led me to an abandoned waterfront warehouse at the edge of the city. Gun in hand, I crept through the shadows, dodging the beams of flashlights from armed henchmen. After a brief, intense shootout in the dusty darkness, I broke through to the back docks and boarded a luxury yacht tied to the pier. Inside the cabin, I found her. Elena was tied to a chair, exhausted but alive. As I cut her ropes, the first rays of dawn began to break over the Atlantic Ocean. Standing at the edge of the pier, watching the deep indigo sky turn into a soft, orange sunrise, I looked back at the distant Miami skyline. The neon lights were finally fading. In this city, those bright lights show you everything: the glamour, the money, the power, except the truth. But finding the truth? Well, that's my job. Case File 102. It was 2 a.m. when the luxury locomotive, the Midnight Star, rolled into Miami Central, completely empty. The conductor, the crew, and 20 wealthy passengers had vanished into thin air between 2 stations. The only thing left in the dining car was a pocket watch, ticking backward, and a faint smell of jasmine perfume. I walked down the empty aisle, the floorboards groaning under my boots. Every window was covered in thick condensation, blurring the neon lights of the platform outside. Someone didn't want this train to reach its destination, and my job was to find out who bought their silence. Case File 103. They called her the Golden Canary, Miami's most celebrated opera singer. But tonight, the Grand Theater was dark. She had disappeared right in the middle of her final performance, just as the curtains fell. The police found no signs of a struggle. When I stepped onto the stage, the velvet curtains heavy with dust, I found a single black feather and a handwritten sheet music titled The Silent Waltz. The notes didn't make sense. They were coded coordinates pointing to the old shipyards. As the rain beat against the theater's glass dome, I realized this wasn't a kidnapping. It was an escape plan. Case File 104. The billionaire art collector Julian Vance was found dead inside his private museum, locked from the inside. No wounds, no poison, no fingerprints. The only thing missing from his multi-million-dollar collection was a nameless, pitch-black canvas painted in 1920. The security guards swore they heard a low, whispering sound coming from the gallery right before the lights went out. I stood in the center of the cold marble room, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. The empty frame hung on the wall like an open mouth. Julian hadn't just collected art. He had collected secrets that finally caught up to him. Case File 105. The Atlantic harbor was swallowed by a thick, heavy fog. A ghost ship, a cargo vessel with its engine still running, had crashed into Pier 9. There wasn't a soul on board, but the radio was broadcasting a loop of static and a child's laughter. I stepped onto the wet wooden dock, the cold sea breeze biting my face. In the captain's cabin, a hot cup of coffee was still steaming on the desk. Next to it, a map of the Bermuda Triangle, with a fresh ink circle drawn over the coordinates. The ocean keeps many secrets, but this ship had brought one back to the shore, a secret that was now waiting for me in the dark. The rain tap-danced against the frosted glass of the old clock tower in downtown New York. Case File 106. The midnight hour had passed, yet inside this ancient room, high above the neon-lit streets, time seemed to stand still. Detective Adams stepped over the creaking floorboards, his trench coat damp from the storm. The air smelled of old parchment, brass polish, and machine oil. On the grand oak desk lay a golden pocket watch, ticking softly, uniquely out of sync with the hundreds of other clocks lining the walls. The legendary Manhattan Clockmaker had vanished, leaving only this final masterpiece. Adam picked it up, feeling the cool metal against his palm. Inside the lid, a tiny handwritten message was engraved. The truth hides within the silence between ticks. Adam closed his eyes, listening to the rhythmic, hypnotic melody of the gears. He knew the answer wasn't lost in the busy city. It was waiting right here, buried under the steady, soothing passage of time. A thick blanket of fog rolled across the grounds of Ravenwood Manor, hidden deep in the woods of Massachusetts. Case File 107. The American northeast storm outside had settled into a gentle, continuous drizzle. Inside the manor's grand library, the only light came from the dying embers of a stone fireplace. Rows upon rows of leather-bound books stretched up to the high ceiling, casting long, peaceful shadows. Detective Adam walked slowly along the aisles, the soft thud of his footsteps muffled by the heavy velvet carpets. He was looking for the lost ledger of 1926. Stopping by the oldest shelf, his fingers brushed against a cold, iron lever hidden behind a row of historic encyclopedias. With a soft click, a secret compartment opened, revealing a dusty blue journal. No high-speed chases, no loud confrontations, just the quiet satisfaction of a mystery solved in the dead of night. Adam sat down in a leather armchair, turning the fragile pages as the sound of rain lulled the grand house to sleep. The glass greenhouse loomed like a crystal palace under the midnight sky. Case File 108. Heavy raindrops drummed a peaceful rhythm against the glass roof, creating a natural sanctuary away from the bustling city. Detective Adam pushed open the heavy iron door, greeted by the warm, humid scent of exotic orchids and damp earth. A rare midnight-blooming flower had been reported missing from the central exhibit. As Adam walked down the winding stone path, surrounded by towering ferns and sleeping lilies, he noticed a faint trail of water droplets leading toward the ventilation shafts. But there was no rush. The atmosphere was calm, wrapped in the soothing green shadows of nature. He found the missing flower safely tucked inside a wooden crate near the exit, left behind by a thief who had panicked. Adam smiled faintly, took a deep breath of the rain-washed air, and watched the night fade into a peaceful morning. The thick, rolling fog of San Francisco swallowed the Golden Gate Bridge and crept silently into the harbor. Case File 109. Outside, a soft, misty rain was falling, blurring the city lights into distant, glowing embers. Detective Adam stood by the window of an old, abandoned warehouse near the piers, his eyes tracking the dark waters. A mysterious foghorn echoed in the distance, a lonely sound that perfectly matched the midnight hour. On a wooden crate in the center of the room sat an antique brass compass, its needle spinning aimlessly, before finally locking due north. It was the only clue left behind by a missing harbor captain. Adam walked over, the floorboards groaning softly under his feet. He picked up the compass, noticing a small map of the California coast tucked beneath its base. There was no rush, no immediate danger, just the calm, rhythmic drumming of rain on the tin roof as Adam began to piece together the captain's quiet escape into the Pacific night. Rain washed over the neon signs of downtown Chicago, turning the pavement into a mirror of blues and purples. Case file 110. Down a quiet alleyway, the heavy oak door of the Velvet Note Jazz Club stood slightly ajar. The music had stopped hours ago, leaving behind a peaceful, empty room that smelled of roasted coffee and old leather. Detective Adams stepped inside, shaking the raindrops from his umbrella. On the empty stage, a lone saxophone rested on its stand, catching the dim glow of a single spotlight. The club's owner had reported a rare, handwritten sheet music from the 1920s missing. Adam walked up to the piano, his fingers gently brushing the ivory keys without making a sound. He looked closer at the music stand and noticed a faint shadow behind the velvet curtain. Tucked safely inside a vintage vinyl sleeve was the missing melody. With the mystery quietly solved, Adam sat back on a plush stool, listening to the steady, hypnotic downpour outside, letting the city's midnight rhythm soothe the mind.